Jake Carter, immersed in the intricate workings of an ancient plasma generator, grumbled to himself as sparks danced around him. "Damn thing's older than me," he muttered, twisting a wrench with more force than finesse. It was a typical day on Station K7, a dilapidated maintenance outpost at the edge of Coalition space. This was where the work was grimy, the pay was meager, and life was predictable, just the way Jake preferred it. That calm was shattered when Commander Holland's voice crackled over his comlink. "Jake, drop whatever you're tinkering with. We have a Priority 1 situation in Hangar Bay 2, she commanded, her tone all business. Wiping grease onto his already soiled jumpsuit, Jake deactivated the faulty generator. "Priority? Here? You're joking, right?" he muttered, grabbing his tools and heading towards the hangar. Priority wasn't a term often used on this forgotten station. K7 was a graveyard for broken-down ships, a place where mechanics like Jake relied on duct tape and ingenuity to keep things running. Despite his usual cynicism, a flicker of curiosity sparked within him. Arriving at Hangar Bay 2, Jake stopped dead in his tracks, awestruck. Before him stood a colossal biomechanical being, a Thonic Guardian, the largest he had ever laid eyes on. The Coalition only deployed Guardians in dire circumstances. These bioengineered protectors were legendary, half-machine, half-living entities created by the Thonic race to safeguard their most valuable assets. Jake had heard tales of their combat abilities, but he never expected to encounter one in person. The immense figure lay slumped on the deck, its armor scarred and fractured, faint blue light emanating weakly from its core. "What in the world happened to it?" Jake asked, expecting no reply. Commander Holland approached, her face a mixture of worry and urgency. "The Guardian's designation is Taron," she explained. "He sustained significant damage during a conflict near the Outer Rim. His systems are critical: biocore, weaponry, mobility. He's barely functioning, and we need him operational, quickly." Jake raised an eyebrow. "We? Since when do we repair walking arsenals?" Holland crossed her arms. "Since now. The Coalition needs Taron back in action before the situation deteriorates, and Jake, you're the most skilled mechanic we have. Do whatever it takes. Fix him." Jake shot her a doubtful look. "Seriously? This isn't some busted thruster coil or a faulty relay. This is alien tech. Living alien tech. I fix machines, not perform miracles." "You're all we've got," Holland stated flatly before turning and leaving Jake alone with Taron. Letting out a sigh and shaking his head, Jake approached the Guardian. Up close, the damage was even more severe than he'd initially thought. Deep fissures lined its exoskeleton, fluid seeped from bioconnectors, and half of its body looked like it had been caught in a plasma explosion. Yet, there was something unsettling about Taron, something vital beneath the layers of machinery. Setting his toolkit down, Jake activated a diagnostic interface by tapping the nearest intact panel. The screen sputtered to life, displaying a jumble of corrupted data. "No wonder they called me," Jake muttered. "No one else would touch this thing." "All right, big guy," he continued, "let's see what makes you tick." As Jake worked, time seemed to vanish. He lost himself in the intricate web of biosynthetic wiring, bypassing damaged circuits and mending mechanical limbs. Hours blurred by, the station's hum replaced by the rhythmic clinking of his tools. Occasionally, the Guardian would twitch, its systems responding to the repairs. Just as Jake was making progress, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the hangar. "Who are you?" Jake froze. The voice had come from the Guardian. Jake," he stammered, unsure if he was speaking to a machine or hallucinating from exhaustion. "I'm the guy they sent to fix you. You repair me." "Why?" The voice was strained, almost pained. It wasn't like conversing with an AI, it was more intimate, as if the Guardian was wrestling with something more profound than just physical injury. Jake scratched his head, unsure how to respond. "Well, looks like you're in rough shape, and apparently, someone out there needs you. So, here I am, doing my job." A pause, then Taron's voice returned, softer this time. "I am broken, but it is not just my body. Jake stared at the flickering lights in Taron's core. You mean you're aware? Conscious? Yes, Taron replied. And I am conflicted. I was not built to feel this. Purpose, it eludes me now. Jake leaned back, crossing his arms. Who? So, you're not just a walking weapon? You're more. That was never my function, Taron finished. A chill ran down Jake's spine. He'd worked on machines all his life, but this was something else entirely. You've got a whole lot more going on in there than I thought, Jake said, his voice laced with curiosity. He had come to fix a broken machine, but he was now facing something far beyond his expertise. But Jake was adaptable. All right, Taron, he said with renewed determination, you're still functioning, so let's figure out how to get you back on your feet. Jake toiled away at the intricate internal mechanisms of a dated plasma generator, muttering under his breath as sparks flew around him. These contraptions are antiques, he grumbled, wrenching a bolt with more force than necessary. Station K7, a decaying maintenance outpost on the fringes of Coalition territory, was his usual haunt. The work was rough, the pay wasn't great, and life was predictable, precisely how Jake liked it. This tranquility was shattered by Commander Holland's voice crackling through his comm system. Jake, abandon whatever project you're engrossed in. We have a top priority emergency in Hangar Bay 2, she ordered, her tone brisk and efficient. Wiping grease on his already grimy overalls, Jake shut down the malfunctioning generator. An emergency? At this location? Seriously, he mumbled to himself, collecting his tools and making his way to the hangar. The word emergency wasn't part of the regular vocabulary on this forgotten station. K7 was a repository for broken-down spacecraft, a place where mechanics like Jake depended on improvisation and makeshift solutions to keep things running. Despite his typical skepticism, a spark of intrigue flickered within him. Upon reaching Hangar Bay 2, Jake froze in astonishment. A massive biomechanical entity, a Thonic Guardian of immense size, stood before him. The Coalition reserved guardians for dire situations. These bioengineered protectors, part machine and part living creature, were legendary, created by the Thonic civilization to defend their most critical resources. While Jake had heard stories of their combat capabilities, he never anticipated seeing one in person. The colossal being lay slumped on the hangar floor, its armor scarred and cracked, a dim blue glow emanating weakly from its central core. What the heck happened to this thing? Jake inquired, not really expecting a reply. Commander Holland approached, her expression reflecting a mixture of anxiety and urgency. This guardian is called Taron, she informed him. He suffered extensive damage during a battle near the Outer Rim. His essential systems, biocore, weapons, mobility, are all critically damaged. He's barely functioning, and we have to get him back in working order, and quickly. Jake arched an eyebrow. We? When did we start repairing walking weapons platforms? Holland folded her arms. We started just now. The Coalition needs Taron operational before the current situation worsens, and Jake, you are our most qualified mechanic. Do what's necessary. Repair him. Jake gave her a doubtful look. You're joking, right? This isn't a busted engine component or a malfunctioning circuit. This is alien tech. Sentient alien tech. I fix machines, not perform resuscitation. You're our only hope, Holland replied plainly, turning and leaving Jake alone with Taron. Exhaling slowly and shaking his head, Jake moved towards the Guardian. The closer he got, the worse the damage appeared. Deep fissures scarred its exoskeleton, fluids leaked from bioconnectors, and half its body looked as though it had been caught in a plasma blast. Yet, there was a disquieting aura about Taron, a sense of vitality hidden beneath the layers of machinery. Placing his toolkit down, Jake initiated the diagnostic interface by pressing the closest undamaged panel. The display sputtered to life, showing a garbled mess of corrupted data. Figures they called me, Jake muttered to himself. No one in their right mind would want to tackle this. "Okay, big fella," he said, addressing the Guardian, "let's see what we're dealing with here." As Jake worked, hours seemed to melt away. He became completely absorbed in the complex web of biosynthetic wiring, rerouting power around damaged circuits, and repairing mechanical limbs. The typical station background noise was replaced by the constant clicking of his tools. Every now and then, the Guardian would spasm, its systems reacting to the ongoing repairs. Deep within Taron's complex internal systems, Jake worked tirelessly through the night, dismantling panels and rerouting circuits with the meticulous care of a bomb disposal expert. Yet, despite his efforts, Taron's core remained unstable, flickering like a dying ember caught between life and total shutdown. Taron hadn't spoken again since their initial exchange, but Jake sensed the presence of a conscious entity observing his every move. Sweat beaded on Jake's forehead as he connected another bypass. "Damn it," he grumbled, "this shouldn't be this difficult." He had repaired ships ravaged by asteroid collisions and platforms hit by direct pirate attacks, but this, repairing a Thonic Guardian, wasn't covered in any repair manual. As he leaned back, exhausted, the diagnostic screen flashed a warning: core integrity 13%. This was not good. Jake sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "I've done everything I can mechanically," he admitted. "You're still not stable." Taron's voice, strained and hushed, resonated through the hangar. "My core, it is damaged beyond repair." Jake rose to his feet and began pacing restlessly. "There has to be a way to stop the deterioration. I mean, you're the most sophisticated piece of tech I've ever encountered. You can't just..." He trailed off, realizing the absurdity of arguing with a biomechanical being essentially on life support. Taron's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The damage is not solely physical. I am conflicted. My programming is at odds with what I feel. What I have become." Jake blinked in confusion. "Feel? What do you mean?" "I was created for war," Taron explained, his voice wavering. "To defend. To destroy. My purpose was clear. But now, I question it. I have witnessed things that do not conform to the logic of my directives." Jake scratched his head. "So, you're saying you've deviated from your original programming? That's significant." Silence hung heavy in the hangar for a moment. Then, Taron spoke again, his voice deeper, more urgent. "There is a method to stabilize me, but it is precarious." Jake, intrigued, crossed his arms. "Go on." "To repair the damage to my core, you must engage my symbiotic protocol," Taron explained. Jake narrowed his eyes. "Symbiotic what, now?" "My core is linked to both biological and mechanical systems," Taron clarified, the blue flicker of his core pulsing weakly. "A complete diagnostic and repair requires the neural input of a sentient being, you. By connecting our neural pathways, you can provide the necessary input to complete the repairs. However, it is risky." Jake snorted. "Risky?" "Yeah, because linking my brain to an unstable death machine sounds like a brilliant plan." He shook his head. "And what happens if this neural link goes sideways?" Taron's voice softened, almost human. "Your mind could be overwhelmed. My systems could fail entirely. Or, we may succeed. But the choice is yours. I cannot compel you." Jake looked at the Guardian, his heart pounding. He wasn't a hero, and this definitely wasn't part of the job description when he signed on to fix broken-down spacecraft in the middle of nowhere. But, staring at Taron, watching the light in its core weaken with every passing second, Jake realized he didn't have many options. If he didn't try, Taron would be gone within hours. And whatever was happening out in the galaxy that required this Guardian, it couldn't be good. "All right, big guy," Jake said, cracking his neck. "Let's do this. Hook me up." Taron's core flickered slightly brighter. "Thank you." Jake drew a deep breath, bracing himself as he positioned himself beside the Guardian's interface panel. Taron extended a slender, metallic tendril, which connected to a port on Jake's wrist-mounted device, a standard mechanics tool, though Jake had never envisioned using it to interface with something this advanced. A sharp tingling sensation, like static electricity, shot up his arm, and then the world around him dissolved. Jake gasped as his vision blurred. He was no longer in the hangar, but inside Taron. Not physically, but mentally, his consciousness adrift in a sea of raw data, fragmented memories, and complex algorithms. Emotions and thoughts swirled around him, a chaotic jumble of information. A profound sense of internal conflict, a war within the Guardian's mind, permeated the space. "Whoa," Jake muttered, taking in the swirling vortex of data. "This is intense." "You are within my neural network," Taron's voice echoed within his mind. "My systems are in disarray. You must assist in stabilizing them." "Yeah, okay," Jake replied, although he hadn't the slightest clue how one was supposed to stabilize a sentient war machine. He was a mechanic, not an expert in artificial intelligence or neural engineering. But as with most situations in his life, Jake figured he'd have to improvise. He concentrated on the most volatile nodes of Taron's core, a pulsing, crimson orbs of energy that seemed to be spiraling out of control. As he approached one, an overwhelming wave of fear washed over him. He recoiled instinctively. "Wait. You're afraid? How is that even possible?" Taron's voice, strained but firm, answered, "Fear is not part of my programming. It is an anomaly, a consequence of witnessing destruction devoid of purpose. The chaos, the loss of life." Jake frowned. This Guardian wasn't simply malfunctioning, it was grappling with something far more profound. It had witnessed too much, done too much, and now it was beginning to unravel. In a strange way, Jake understood. He had spent years repairing broken things, and in that time, he had learned a fundamental truth: sometimes things didn't break because of a mechanical flaw, they broke because they weren't designed to withstand the weight of the universe. He extended his hand, cautiously touching the unstable node, and felt a surge of energy course through him. Vivid flashes of battles, of devastation, and at the heart of it all, a single, agonizing question: why? Jake gritted his teeth, focusing all his energy on the node. "You're not alone in this, Taron. We'll get through it. Just focus. Stay with me." With that, the node stabilized, its crimson glow fading to a soft, steady blue. One down. But there were more, and Jake could feel the strain building within his own mind. The neural connection was more intense than he had anticipated, pushing him to his limits. But there was no turning back now. As they worked together, Jake began to grasp the complexity of Taron's existence, how he had been engineered for war but had somehow evolved into something more. And Taron, in turn, began to understand the human who had linked with him. A mechanic, yes, but also someone who had his own internal struggles, his own doubts about purpose and meaning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the crimson node shifted to blue. The chaos within Taron's mind subsided, and Jake felt the neural link loosen its grip, a weight lifting from his chest. Taron's voice, softer now, echoed in Jake's thoughts. "You have stabilized me. I am functional. But the conflict, it remains." Jake blinked as his vision cleared, the hangar coming back into focus. His head throbbed, but he was still standing, just barely. "Well, you're back online," Jake muttered, rubbing his temples. "But you're still troubled." "Yes," Taron replied. "The question persists. My purpose, does it matter?" Jake sighed, slumping onto the floor beside his toolkit. "Hell if I know, Taron. But you're alive. And that counts for something." The station's usual quiet hum was abruptly shattered by blaring alarms. Jake jolted awake, his back against a bulkhead, still disoriented from the neural link with Taron. Red emergency lights pulsed, bathing the hangar in an unsettling glow. "What now?" he groaned, pushing himself to his feet. Taron's core, now stable but dim, emitted a soft blue light. "We are under attack," Taron's voice resonated. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. Attacked? By who? Before Taron could elaborate, Commander Holland's voice blared over the station's comm system. All personnel to defensive positions. We have incoming hostiles. Daruk Raiders. Repeat, Daruk Raiders inbound. Prepare for immediate engagement. Jake's expression hardened. The Daruk, a ruthless band of mercenaries, were infamous for their brutal attacks on outlying settlements and stations. They weren't interested in negotiations or resources, their objective was total annihilation. And now, they were here. Fantastic, Jake muttered, just what we needed. Taron's voice echoed in his mind. The Daruk intend to destroy the station's energy core. It powers not only this facility but also a significant portion of the sector's defense grid. Its destruction would be a devastating blow to the coalition. Jake's brow furrowed. And I'm guessing they're also here to take you out? Affirmative, Taron confirmed. In my compromised state, I pose a significant threat to their operation. They will do whatever is necessary to ensure my destruction, along with this station. Jake snatched his toolkit, his hands moving instinctively as he processed the seriousness of the situation. He wasn't a soldier, but he wasn't about to stand idly by while space pirates tore apart his station, and Taron, the big guy, had just been brought back from the brink. He wasn't going to let them destroy him now. The ground vibrated as explosions rocked the station. The Daruk had arrived. Jake set his jaw, turning to Taron. Can you fight? Taron's light dimmed slightly. My combat systems are still compromised. Without full mobility and power, I am operating at reduced capacity. However, I can provide support. Jake exhaled sharply. Better than nothing. We'll make it work. The station's walls groaned under the barrage of incoming fire. Distant blasts grew closer, signaling the Daruk's advance into the station. Jake cautiously peered out of the hangar doors. The normally deserted corridors of Station K7 were now filled with smoke, flashing red lights, and the distinctive clang of armored boots. Daruk troopers, hulking figures clad in black armor, swarmed through the station, systematically dismantling every defense in their path. Jake's pulse quickened. We have to get to the core, he said. If they destroy it, we're done for. Taron's voice was low and steady. I will provide suppressing fire. You must reach the main console and activate the station's defensive shields. Jake nodded, heart pounding. Got it. He stepped into the corridor just as a group of Daruk soldiers spotted him. Intruder, one roared, raising its weapon. Before Jake could react, a blast of blue energy vaporized the Daruk trooper. Jake spun around to see Taron's remaining weapon system, a forearm-mounted energy cannon, glowing faintly. The Guardian was slow, its movements hampered by damage, but its aim was true. Thanks, Jake muttered, then broke into a run. Navigating the chaotic corridors, Jake sprinted towards the station's core, the rhythmic clang of Daruk boots echoing behind him. He could hear the intermittent blasts of Taron's energy cannon, a comforting sound in the midst of the escalating chaos. He reached the central chamber, skidding to a halt as he took in the scene. Towering over the main energy core stood Crowan, the Daruk leader, a hulking figure encased in jagged, dark armor. He was flanked by a squad of heavily armed troopers, their weapons trained on the core. Crowan turned slowly, his predatory yellow eyes fixing on Jake. Ah, he rumbled, a deep, mocking tone in his voice. The little mechanic. Come to play hero? Jake's heart hammered against his ribs, but he held his ground. You're not blowing this place to hell, Crowan. Crowan let out a dark, menacing laugh. You think you can stop me? You and your broken Guardian? Jake didn't respond. He just clenched his fists, bracing himself for the inevitable confrontation. He knew he was outmatched, but he wouldn't back down. Taron was buying him time, and he wouldn't let it go to waste. Just as Crowan raised his arm, a wicked plasma blade snapping to life from his wrist, the station lights flickered violently. A wave of energy rippled through the structure, causing Jake to stumble. He grabbed onto a nearby railing for support as the power systems buckled under the strain. The Derek had breached a secondary power grid, escalating the situation drastically. His comlink crackled to life, Commander Holland's strained voice cutting through the chaos. "Carter! We're losing ground. Crowan's forces are overwhelming us. What's your status?" "I'm with Taron," Jake replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Shields are up, but they won't hold. They're after the core." "How long can you hold them off?" Holland's voice was grim. "Not long. We're evacuating civilians and non-combat personnel. We need more firepower." Jake glanced at Taron, who stood behind him, battered but resolute. "I'll get to the core. Taron's holding what he can. We're gonna need a miracle, though." Before Holland could respond, another explosion rocked the station, much closer this time. The Derek were closing in on the heart of the facility. Time was running out. "Go," Taron said, his voice quiet but firm. "I will delay them. You must protect the core." Jake hesitated. "You're not in any shape to fight them off alone. I can't just leave you here." Taron's core flickered faintly, its blue light dimming. "You must. My systems are failing, but I can still hold them for a while. Enough for you to reach the core." There was no time to argue. Jake swallowed hard, nodding curtly. "Don't get yourself scrapped, big guy." Taron's core pulsed weakly. "That may not be up to me." With that, Jake turned and sprinted toward the central control console, the sounds of battle echoing behind him. He could hear Taron's energy blasts, followed by the deafening roar of Crowan's plasma blade clashing against the Guardian's damaged armor. He reached the console and began working frantically, his fingers flying across the keys to access the core's control systems. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought to bypass the damaged security protocols and regain control of the core. The sounds of the battle intensified. Taron's movements were growing slower, his blasts weaker. Jake risked a glance over his shoulder and his blood ran cold. Taron was losing. Badly. Crowan was relentless, his attacks precise and devastating. Taron, barely able to move, was fighting with everything he had left, but the damage was too extensive. Sparks flew as Crowan's plasma blade carved deep into Taron's armor, sending chunks of metal flying. Jake found himself staring at Crowan and his Derek mercenaries, trapped in a standoff with no clear escape route. Taron was engaged in his own struggle elsewhere in the station, and Jake had no idea how long the Guardian could hold out. He was facing one of the galaxy's most notorious warlords armed with nothing but his toolkit and a desperate hope. Crowan, his eyes filled with contempt, took a step forward, his voice a low growl. "Do you truly believe you can stop me, human? You're just a mechanic. I am a warlord." Jake's heart pounded, but he held his ground. "Maybe not," he replied, his voice surprisingly steady, "but you're not leaving here alive either." Crowan let out a dark, mocking chuckle. "Brave words from a dead man," he snarled. He raised his arm, a wicked plasma blade crackling to life on his wrist, and lunged forward to deliver the killing blow. Just as the blade descended, a burst of energy struck Crowan, throwing him off balance. Taron, battered and barely operational, limped into the chamber, his core flickering weakly. His remaining weapon, a forearm-mounted energy cannon, glowed faintly as he aimed it at Crowan. "Jake, get to safety!" Jake stared at Taron, his condition even worse than he had imagined. Deep gashes scarred his biomechanical body, and sparks flew from exposed circuits. His movements were slow and strained, but he remained defiant. Crowan, regaining his composure, narrowed his eyes at Taron. "So, the Guardian still lives," he sneered. "How disappointing." Taron's voice, weakened but resolute, echoed through the chamber. "You will not destroy this station." Crowan chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "Look at you, Guardian. You can barely stand." Taron's core flickered, its blue light fading. He turned to Jake, his voice soft but urgent. "Jake, I will hold him off. You must prevent the core from overloading. It's our only chance." Jake's heart sank. "No way." I'm not abandoning you. Taron's gaze was firm. You must. I cannot defeat him, not like this. But I can buy you the time you need. Jake knew Taron was right. If the core overloaded, the entire sector's defenses would collapse, leaving the Daruk free to wreak havoc. He swallowed hard, accepting the harsh reality. All right, he muttered, just don't get yourself killed. Taron's core pulsed weakly. That may not be in my control anymore. Jake sprinted towards the central control console, the sound of battle echoing behind him. Taron's energy blasts mixed with the roar of Crowan's plasma blade clashing against the Guardian's damaged armor. Reaching the console, Jake worked frantically, his fingers flying across the keys to access the core's control systems. He fought to bypass damaged security protocols and regain control, sweat dripping from his brow. The battle raged on, the sounds growing more desperate. Taron's blasts became weaker, his movement slower. Jake glanced back, and his blood ran cold. Taron was losing, badly. Crowan pressed his attack, relentless and precise. Taron fought valiantly, but he was barely able to move. Sparks flew as Crowan's plasma blade carved into Taron's armor, tearing chunks of metal away. An explosion rocked the chamber, throwing Jake to the floor. He looked up, vision blurring, to see Taron staggering backward, his core flickering violently. Crowan advanced, his plasma blade raised for the final blow. No! Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. Taron, barely standing, turned his head towards Jake, his voice faint but resolute. Jake, remember, you are more than what you fix. You can fight for what matters. Crowan roared and lunged, his blade aimed at Taron's core. There was no time. Taron couldn't move, he was finished. Jake's world seemed to slow down. Then, something within him snapped. A surge of emotion, rage, grief, desperation, exploded in his chest. His fading connection with Taron flared to life. He felt something shift, a warmth spreading through him like a surge of energy. Without thinking, Jake stood, his eyes locked on Crowan. He could feel Taron's energy, somehow still alive, coursing through him. It was more than just the neural link, it was something deeper, a shared purpose. Crowan sneered, turning towards Jake. You wish to die as well, human? Very well. Jake's voice, low and filled with an unfamiliar strength, resonated through the chamber. You should have stayed dead, Crowan. Crowan roared and charged, his plasma blade raised. But this time, Jake was ready. With a speed and precision that wasn't his own, he dodged the attack, stepping in close and slamming a wrench into Crowan's side with a force that sent the warlord reeling. It wasn't just Jake's strength, it was Taron's, somehow still alive within him, guiding his movements. Crowan snarled and swung again, but Jake ducked, grabbing a piece of shattered metal and using it to block the strike. The plasma blade hissed as it met the metal, but Jake held firm. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle for survival. Jake's muscles burned, but he felt Taron's strength pushing him forward. Finally, with a surge of energy, Jake dodged Crowan's final swing and drove the metal shard deep into the warlord's chest. Crowan gasped, his eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the ground. Jake stood panting, his hands shaking, staring at Crowan's lifeless form. He felt a warmth in his chest, Taron's presence fading. He knew what it meant. Taron, he whispered, turning to the Guardian. Taron's core flickered one last time, the blue light dimming to nothing. You fought well, Jake. Now you must live for more than the machines you repair. And then the light was gone.